Chris's question, he says, I haven't seen this covered before, so I wanted to check with the experts. When training with power, we are always given a range for any given zone. If you're using TrainerRoad, you'll see a specific target, by the way, and it will give you that target. However, if you read Chad's workout descriptions, in many cases, he'll say, this is the ideal range that we want you to stay within, depending on the workout. And, so he wants you to work within there. So just as a heads up for folks, that's the kind of the context we're talking about. He says, when training with power, we are always given a range for any given zone, VO2 max being 106 to 120%, for example. Knowing this is the case, should we always be approaching these with the mindset that there is more benefit to training at the higher end of that range? For example, 120% versus 106% to reap the maximum gains. Or will we see the same benefits from backing off and preserving some energy by targeting the lower end of the range? I'm especially curious about this for sweet spot, VO2 max, and endurance zones, as these are the three that make up the majority of the training most of us aspiring athletes spend our time in. So he says, thanks for all the great advice you guys provide, and not only to your own, but to the greater cycling community as a whole. It's our pleasure, Chris. We love doing it. So that's a great question because, Chad, I could see this going a couple ways, right? So let's say that you have like 112% is your target for VO2 max, and you're like, I feel great today. I want to ride at 120% because I want to get more value from this workout. Or the opposite. You're riding at 112% and you're like, ooh, today is a rough day. I'm going to back it down to 108% because it's a rough day. And as a result, the conclusion that could be made based off of the supposition here is that I'm getting less value from the workout, right?
Yeah.
So
it's all very logical too. It's just not very physiological because energy systems function along a continuum. We know that we're never exclusively in one, exclusively in another. There's no hard line where you stop being one thing and start utilizing another energy resource. We have our toe in several different bits of water. And you could look at it pretty simply if you just consider what's termed a power duration relationship. And if you've been training with power for any length of time, this is absolutely a term you've come across. And it says quite simply that, the longer the efforts, the shorter the power, the lower the power. And then the shorter the efforts, the higher the power. This is just the way it works. You can't go high power, high duration. I suppose you could go low power, low duration, but to not much effect.
But Chad, I just want to do all the watts all of the time.
Yeah, right.
Just make it say 400.
Sure. Go ahead and do that and see how long it lasts and see where you get. It's not going to pan out. We have the data. So this is simply to say that the interval duration is going to dictate where within each band of power, and let's call it that. It's not it's a range, but I like band of power. Where exactly is going to depend on your discipline specifics. So each of these bands is energy system specific. We get within this band and we're targeting particular adaptations, particular types of race performance that we're going to become capable of should we stay the course. And then time within each of these particular ranges or bands is likely to achieve really similar training adaptations across the band. So it's not as though if you're at 105 versus 120%, you're going to get a drastically different change in your VO2 energy system. If you're at 88 versus 94, your sweet spot intervals are going to be different from one another. Or even if you're at 56% of your threshold, all the way up to about 75% of your threshold, that the aerobic adaptations are going to be drastically different from end of range to end of range. So the power percentage really just limits how long you can stay there. And that's only really meaningful in terms of, and the term often bandied about is time in zone. I'd like us to get used to using time and energy system. So zone is not as descriptive as I'd like it to be. Energy system, I think, is a bit more. So here we now recognize that the more time we spend in each system, the greater the stimulus for improvement. And this is the essence of accumulation. We have to be in a particular time. We have to accumulate time there. The more time we spend, the greater the stimulus for adaptation. Given proper recovery, subsequent adaptation, we get stronger, we get faster. But progression is really the overarching objective here. And it includes accumulation, but it's not limited exclusively to that. Sorry, this page refreshes really slowly sometimes. Okay, so when it comes to accumulating time within each of these energy systems, you just have to look at what you need to be good at, because there can be a really tight range depending on what you're after. And if you're a full distance triathlete, maybe you need to be specifically, over time, really tightly within a 75% to 78% of FTP range, because that is going to be strictly applicable to what you're going to do at some point. So you're really heightening the power work ratio at the highest end of the range relative to what you need to be able to achieve. And that takes different shapes depending on different disciplines. With road racing, maybe you need to be really good at 120% repeats, but you need to be able to repeat them many times over. When it comes to time trialing, with the threshold range, which is where you're going to be operating, maybe that's a 98 to 102% range. So you have to be really good within that specific range. It's all relative to where you need to be. And all we're really after is working towards, in the simplest terms, a higher work capacity. We need to be able to do more work, but the improvements we're chasing have to be specific to our goals. They have to suit the discipline that we want to be particularly good at.
Yeah.
And basically, this is exactly what training plans do. They isolate. We broadly approach each of these energy systems, and then we narrow over the course of each phase transition to the point where when you emerge from your specialty plan, you are finely targeted. You're specific to what you need to be good at.
Right. I think this is such a good point, because Chris is asking about what gives the greatest benefit. Well, benefit is subjective, right? There's no one answer to this. So what's going to be the greatest benefit to you is really going to depend on what your goals are. What is it that you're working toward? Like Chad said, what is it that you need to be able to do? There is no one answer to rule them all here. It's very individual, and it really comes down to what do you want to be able to do?
Probably the most focused example of that is like a 40K time trialist, right? Like somebody that's really focusing in on that. They could care less about their power except for that 50-minute, if that's like their goal, right? Like they want to be for 50 minutes, what sort of intensity can they maintain for that? And that's exactly what they intend to train. And even though that's a very specific scenario, even something like road racing, where it has perhaps more varied demands, that sort of thing, I think that you're a better athlete if you specialize. And if you focus on one specific thing, you're probably increasing your chances of success. So that's the whole point of training, is training you for a specific goal and outcome. And so once again, it's not just do more and more will be better. It's do what you need to do.
Exactly. So if we apply that to the sweet spot power band, which is really narrow, in terms of all of these, it's probably the tightest one, which is, as we term it, and a lot of people agree with this, 88 to 94% of threshold. And if we're doing this, say, for 20 minutes at a time, we can steer each 20-minute interval at a different end of that range and achieve a different outcome based on what we're looking for. So in the case of maybe a 6x20 workout done in the sweet spot, big workout, mind you, we can take the recoveries in between those, start them at 3 minutes, which, this already assumes a high level of fitness. Is probably something that's going to happen in a later phase of training, but take that 3-minute recovery, shave it down to 2-minute recoveries. Later in the phase, shave it down to 1-minute recoveries. And then boom, you've got effectively 2 hours at really close to what might amount to a marathon mountain bike pace, something very specific to that discipline. You can take those same 20-minute intervals, do 3 of them, do it at the higher end of the range, 94% of your threshold. Big, long 10-minute, really recuperative recoveries. Thermoregulation does its job. You can get some food in, some liquid in, and then hit the next one. Gradually, we trim those down to 5-minute, or eventually, and then down to 2-minute. And before you know it, you've got 50 minutes very close to your time trial power if you're a 40K time trialist. So each end of that range can be really specific to the discipline you're pursuing.
And to that point too, what those workouts Chad said, that 3x20 with the shorter rest, in the same time, that could still have the exact same TSS, each one of those workouts.
Yeah,
so
real
you
close,
can't,
if not the same.
And we're probably guilty of this too, but I think a lot of people live and die by TSS, where if you can do that last workout of 3x20 with 2-minute rests versus you start with 3x20 at 10 minutes rest, I think we all know you're faster if you can do 3x20 at 2 minutes rest. If 3x20 at 10 minutes rest was challenging.
That's
right?
a great example.
Yeah. And so TSS is useful. I love how Amber said it last week. She said TSS is like a limiter, a governor, where you don't want to ramp too quickly because you'll burn out, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're fitter or that you're not getting fitter by the amount of TSS. It's not the end result. The end result is the watts over time. That's what shows if you're getting faster.
Yeah.
And that's really what you should be the end result of what you're chasing rather than a specific this many weeks of average training stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so Chris, I want to address each of the 3 specific energy systems that you recommended. So let's move on to VO2 max. Effectively, and we've talked about VO2 max enough times that I think most people recognize that you can achieve VO2 max, that high level of aerobic uptake, anywhere along that band. Really, anything over threshold is going to get you there eventually, theoretically. But we've targeted 105% to 120%. And in any case, the longer you go, the closer you're going to push to that limit. You will get there eventually. Even at 105, we can get you there, and you actually get there pretty quickly. Anytime you're above threshold, it's discouragingly quickly how fast you fatigue.
So uncomfortable.
Yes, it is.
It doesn't matter if you're 1% over, it's a miserable place to spend time. But the point again is that whether you're at 105 or you're at 120, you're going to achieve similar adaptations across that range, especially if you use the appropriate duration relative to that intensity. So it's how do you accumulate enough time to stimulate fitness is really what it's about. So if you've reached a point where 27 minutes at 120% of your threshold, and this is a real thing, this is a 3x3x3, that workout's out there, it's commonly applied, then what's the next step upward? You're at 120, but now maybe you go 7x4. Now you're just a minute longer at a slightly lower intensity, a slightly lower percentage of threshold, but you might get more time at that high percentage of VO2. Maybe then you step up to a 5x5, which is substantially less duration. Now you're only 25 minutes and you drop it down way down to 114.
My heart rate is going up just thinking about this right now. Just for the record.
I also really like how you said just a minute longer.
That was where my heart kind of started jacking up.
Like with VO2 max work, if you tell me just 15 seconds longer, I'm like, that's a tall ask.
but I gave you a 2% reduction, so deal with it. It'll be all right.
Yeah,
and then we can get hyper specific within that, and we're kind of drifting away from specifically targeting that range. Now we're getting all over the place, but this is I guess just a little testament to how important the specificity is when we get into something like those reduced amplitude bill outs, or those ones where you're at 88% or you're 120, then you come back to 88%. And even that, we can't say you're at specifically over the course of that. I mean, I suppose you could look at average or normalized power, but in that case, we don't even care really where we are within that range. We just care that there's a high level of oxygen uptake, and we're doing something that's really similar to the demands we're going to face during a race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think
that preps you. Oh, sorry, Nate. One quick thing. Once again, that preps you so well for the dynamic nature of a race. So once again, even though we're talking about the energy systems that you work and everything else, these are the energy systems that you work on race day, right? And it's really important. Sorry, Nate, go ahead.
I want to say another thing, because these types of workouts can be very hard. And we talk about too, like Chad's doing the time inside of his own, right? And that's very important. And I just had one, I did, what was it? Bear's Peak, which is like 5 times 12 at like 95 to 99% threshold. Then it has a warm up too, that gives you like an extra 5 minutes at threshold. So 65 minutes. And I had the Sunday workout and I had a hard day that day, and I did not nail that workout. So I took some breaks in the middle of it. I still got 60 minutes out of 65 minutes at 95 to 99. And I think what happens to a lot of people too is you do that and you go, I'm a failure. I need to switch my training methodology. Everything is wrong. When you really did 60 out of 65.
It was ETAP's fault.
But like, yeah, you think of everything. I have coronavirus now, obviously.
Right.
But what happens, you should not progress to the 15-minute intervals, but you still got a lot of benefit. Amber says one of our meetings here, you still got a ton of benefit from that workout. You just aren't ready for the performance to go to the next step. So it's not like I should have just not worked out, right?
Oh, it's not a loss.
Exactly. It's not a loss. It's just, you're not progressing to the next phase, but it's still really, really good what you did. And in VO2 max, man, you have to be mentally firing and physically firing to be able to nail it.
Yeah, it's all gains, right? So you might not have progressed to the point that you were hoping to that day, but you still progressed. It was still forward progression. And again, progress isn't always linear. One of the things that, so Chad's talking about the VO2 and the specificity of what you're going to need to be able to do. And we talked earlier about how road racing in particular can have really, really variable demands even within one race. And so one of the things that I used to do, and I'll just share this because it might be valuable to somebody listening. I know we don't have a lot of races on the calendar right now, but in the future, when you do, you want to be able to train all of these energy systems so you can be really flexible and adapt to what's happening in the race. But one of the things that you can do to plan ahead is to study the race course. So if you know, for example, what amateur nationals or elite nationals is going to be on a particular course, look at the course. And we've talked before about selection. So what part of that course do you think is going to be really selective? So one of the national championships I did, there was one particular hill. It was not long, but the first part of it was really, really steep. And then it kind of eased off a little bit, but it's still pretty steep. And it was only like a 4-minute effort, but it was going to be very selective because of how steep it was and how tricky it was going to be to get into position coming into that climb. So one of the things I did to train for that race was I identified this selection point is going to be a very hard 4-minute VO2 effort on a steep section of terrain. So that was what I trained. I really focused on that 4-minute effort in the VO2 max zone. So don't think that just because you're a road racer, you have to be all over the map, or because you're not doing a 40K TT, you can't specialize. You can do your homework and study what parts of the race are going to be most selective. What is going to be the part of the race that's going to make the biggest difference, especially for you, look at your own strengths and weaknesses and see like, what's the point that's going to be the toughest for you, and train that particular part of the race. And that can be really, really, really helpful.
To expand on that too. So Pete and Amber have done every single Northern California race. Amber's won just about every one of them. The only one she hasn't won, they weren't racing those when I was there. And, but to what she just said, they can also, if you have research people have done it, they can tell you the selective part, and how you then race it is, I'm not going to use any energy until the selective part. Like right. Amber or Pete says, yeah, people always try to do a breakaway at this point in the race, but it always comes back and it's this final climb, or it's this every lap, it's going to be this climb and it's going to be attrition. So save all your energy for that one. And those type of insights, if you can talk to someone who knows how to race and has done that race a few times, it helps so much to like not waste your energy. Because a lot of times in these races, you are one effort away from getting dropped. At least me, I'm a big guy on a lot of these climbs. And if I would have done a previous effort, I would not have made it the next time. So.
Yeah. And like I said, some of these efforts are not long. 4 minutes doesn't seem like a really long time, but when you're doing it over and over and over, lap after lap, or even if you're only doing it one time, if it goes hard enough, it can be a split-second difference to make the difference between whether you're in the front group or you've just missed that selection. So having that focus, having those insights ahead of time to help inform your training, help you mentally prepare for the race, is just gold.
Have any of you ever seen it where the group is 3 seconds ahead of you cresting and you cannot get back on, and they're just like, come back? It's just 3 seconds and they don't. It's
like this slow-mo horror film where you're just like,
yeah, the hand reaches.
Yeah. And that's 3 seconds, right? And think about all the things you could have done in training and in the race so that you didn't, in positioning, so that you didn't lose that 3 seconds. And then afterwards they're like, yeah, the race was easy after that until the end. And you're like, what? That happened in one of the crits. Like as soon as I in the Lasma thing, like the normalized power went down to like 200 watts for like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I just could not hold on.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes.
One point that I want to mention before we get into I think we're probably going to jump into the endurance zone after this, Chad, I think. But one thing I want to mention that is a really key point that Amber made, and I just want to hammer this home. So the course can have like a very... it can have a decisive point in it, but that does not mean that that's how you have to race that race. And you'll learn a lot through the process of specifying your training as you're going through the process of base, build, and specialty. You'll learn a lot about what you're good at and what comes easier to you. If it's the ability to repeat efforts, if it's the ability to go longer in VO2 max efforts relatively than you think other people can do, anything like that. You start to say, okay, this is my one strength. And then it's super key to race according to that, right? And that's that's one of the perks of the process of going through a training plan with consistency that's specializing as you go, is the fact that you start to become aware of your strengths and your weaknesses. So then when the course does serve you a specific menu, so to speak, you know exactly which item to take for you, not for everybody else, not how everybody else races the race, but how you're going to do it. We'll have a special guest on the podcast in the coming weeks who actually did this at Mountain Bike National Championships, raced the race entirely his way, and it paid off massively. So there's something to that, right, Chad, in the sense that that's specifying you should also be heads up in that process and learn about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Undoubtedly. Yep. And as much as I would like a seamless segue back into where we were, I've had a few along the way, and we keep taking different tangents, and I come up with a new segue, and then we go a different direction. So I'm just going to start back on endurance.
Sorry, Chad.
Not slick. No, it was good information. I enjoyed the conversation. Okay, so back to endurance, which is the third zone that you wanted to discuss, Chris. This one's pretty simply just a matter of time available. In terms of, you need to deliver a sufficient stimulus to spur more adaptation. So if you're accustomed to riding 5-hour rides at 70%, well, now you got to do a 5-hour ride at 75% or a 6-hour ride at 70%. Either way, you got to change the duration a bit. You may find that 2-hour rides for a rider like that at 60% simply aren't stressful enough. So you either got to push toward the higher end of that range, or you got to add more time at whatever percentage of the range you're falling in at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Is that it?
On endurance, it is. I have a few additional concerns. I just didn't know someone was going to take it over. I welcome it. I couldn't recover from that one. Just kidding.
Let's jump into the concerns, because these are good points.
Yes, let's go back to the focusing on where in this range I need to be. You might be able to tough it out at the top end of the range, but again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Overload's easy to achieve. It's not hard to beat yourself up in a race. It's not hard to beat yourself up in a workout, but effective overload is what we're looking for. And that's the tricky part. Basically, we need to stagger or stage workouts such that you've achieved sufficient recovery by the time you get to the next one, so that you can maximize the benefit of that next workout. And if you kill yourself on a Tuesday because for whatever reason you thought 7x3 VO2 max wasn't enough and I'm going to do 9 or 10 or 11, that can put you in a hole that makes that next workout not only painful, but probably less productive. And then it's a really tough situation to avoid, that the snowball builds quickly and rapidly. From there, people are so reluctant or resistant to altering their training plan because they're tired, because they overdid one workout, and that next workout has to be done exactly as scripted. I need to do it this way. This is the only way I'm going to get faster. This is not modifiable. It's not malleable. So they push through that next one. Inevitably, they push through the next one, and they're just clinging, holding on for their recovery days, holding on for their recovery weeks, which they eventually get, but they're carrying so much fatigue into it that they probably don't emerge from them in this fully recovered state that they need to be in order to start the next training phase. So it may not seem like much, but overdoing a single workout, can lead you into this whole downward spiral.
You are describing me right there.
I'm describing every rider. Every rider's been through this. It's the certain riders who repeat the whole course.
Certain.
On Sunday, Pete and I, we took back, well, we didn't take back, but we beat Keegan and Jonathan on this little loop thing that Jonathan loves to razz me about. And by the way, we were going to try to take Brandon's KOM on that, and Brandon waited. He hit on the side of the road, waited till we went past on Geiger, gave us 3 minutes, and then came on, caught us on Geiger, and then sat on our train.
That's so clever.
And overpulled in some of the climbs, and then in Washoe Valley underpulled. Kind of made us a little bit slower, but anyways, that was Brandon. Very sneaky. Well, that's how competitive we are. Just waiting on the side of the road. Is anyone going to take my KOM? But we went so hard on that coming into my next workout, those threshold ones, I was just drained. But I was like, I need to do this. It is on the plan. Like, I can just do it, even though my Sunday ride was way harder than the prescribed Sunday ride. You know what I mean? And I did not take that into account. And then I tried to do another hard workout the day afterwards, and I didn't make it through the warm up, and I switched to Lazy Mountain.
Well, it's really hard to to kind of lose the plot and to stop recognizing that what you're really after is improving your race performance, and you get a little short-sighted and you just focus on the workouts, you just focus on the ride at hand. And I think in the interest of fun, that's probably the best excuse for diverting. But if it's structured training and you know full well what you're doing at that time is questionable at best, then you only have yourself to blame.
I think if I would have done, I could have reduced it to 10-minute intervals instead of 12. And I think I could have got through those, right? So just to your point, like I was trying to live and die by the training plan rather than doing adjustments based on how I was feeling in performance.
There's the other side of it too, in the sense that, so in your case, Nate, it was like the fun motivation of chasing this calm was what got you there. But then there's the other side of things where people ramp up the intensity because, once again, they're kind of hoping for like a shortcut, right? Like they're hoping that that's going to somehow get them there if they do go extra hard, and then they end up putting themselves in that hole. Amber,
right.
you have some notes on that.
Yeah, I don't know where I heard this quote. So if anybody knows where this came from and can attribute this, please let me know. But the quote is this: when you're in a hurry, take the long, sure path. This is not the time for shortcuts. So when it comes to training, this is never more true than with training, right? Because steady progression, and we've said this so many times before, consistency is what prevents these kinds of setbacks. So tackling too much too fast, when you're in a hurry and you're trying to take a shortcut instead of taking that long, sure path, tackling too much too fast is going to require you, ultimately, at some point, it will catch up with you and you will have to step back to recover, either from fatigue or illness or injury. It will catch up to you. So in a way, that long, sure path actually gets you there the fastest. And ultimately also with a more robust and stronger foundation of fitness. So sometimes people like to think of discipline as being able to push yourself as hard as you possibly can. Honestly, the hardest part is being patient and having the patience to stay the path and be consistent, and then to believe in the process, even when the progress is not linear. So as Chad is saying, taking those long-term objectives into consideration, that's where the discipline is actually the most difficult. And so it's an easy thing to conflate and think that it's just about like, oh, just go hard as I can, and that's when I'm being really disciplined. No, sometimes it really is about, okay, I'm just going to do the workout today. I'm going to do it the way it's prescribed, and then I know I'm going to be ready for tomorrow.
Great points. So good. That's how you get faster, right? It's and that doesn't build brittle fitness. It doesn't build any of the stuff that just, like, a flash in the pan sort of a moment for you in terms of your cycling performance. It's the sort of thing that you can rely upon when you've done that. It's just, I mean, it sounds really logical right now, but we're really good at being illogical once we get on the bike and, pushing too hard or not, changing things that way. So
that's a quick clip. And I wonder how many people too have, like, you do it and you go through like a phase and you get a small increase and more is coming, but you lose it and you're like, I need to change everything. Like, I need to change something in my life. Maybe if I should start to lose weight right now too.
You're
like,
actually just around you're just around the corner, right? From
exactly.
Yes. But
you were so close, but you have not been consistent. Or you lose your consistency, you change stuff, or you try to accelerate, you put your foot on the gas. And then that's actually worse. And I've done that too, many times. I'm trying to be more, what is a kind athlete? I think that's what Amber says. Like,
just be kind to yourself. Yeah.
That's hard to do.
Be your own best ally.
If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up.
If you didn't like this video, you can give it a thumbs down, but let us know what you would have done differently in the comments below.
If you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, check out TrainerRoad.com.
Do it.